Hey everyone, welcome to Learn DAX channel. My name is Siddesh, and in the previous video we had seen how do we calculate the max sales amount in a week and also the corresponding date. If you haven't already watched that video, I will leave the link in the description. You can go and check it out. Now in this particular video, we are going to see how the filter function would behave in a couple of different scenarios. So let's get started with the video. Uh, what I want to calculate is the sales amount on a filter condition. So I will use this measure called filter condition in row context. So I will calculate the sales amount such that filtered my date table such that the date is greater than or equal to max sales invoice date. Where do I have the sales invoice date? Yeah, there I have it. Okay, it's the city. Yeah, I close the filter condition. So far so good. I'm calculating the sales amount such that the date should be greater than equal to max of sales invoice date. Now what's happening in this case is that whatever argument I'm passing, which is a max sales invoice date, it is going to be calculated in the row context, which means if I'm iterating in the first row, the date corresponding to first row is going to be first Jan, and that's also going to be my max sales date. So we are going to get the identical sales amount, which we'll just see as we build this into a visual. So if I pull the date on my table, and then I want the sales amount, and I also want, what was that measure name? Filter condition row. Yeah. So you see the identical condition, because in this particular situation I am comparing this date with the maximum date. But what is the maximum date in this current row? If I consider this row, 11th of Jan. So 11th of Jan is my date, and 11th of Jan is also my max sales invoice date, which is why the sales amount is turning out to be identical to what the sales amount is in that particular column. So for the 1st of Jan, the sales amount is 11,95,000, and if I use it through that filter condition at the row level, it's giving me the same, because in that particular row, the sales date or the max sales invoice date is also 1st of Jan. Now let's try to tweak this a little bit. I'll copy this and let's create a new measure. I'll call it filter condition as a variable. Now I will call this variable cal. Variable sales amount will be, and another variable will be my sales date, and I will define the max sales date in here. Max sales invoice date. And now instead of using this, I will simply use the variable, right? Sales date. And now I'll not return the sales amount. First, I'll return the max or the sales date, and you'll see why I'm doing that. Okay, so now I'll pull this on the canvas, and if I convert it into a card, so just see what I'm getting. I am getting 31st of December 2021, because that is the max date in my entire data set. But what if I pull this same measure on this table? You see that even though this same measure is giving me the value of 31st December, the moment I pull it in the context of this table, wherein this row has the max sales date or the max date or the date as 1st of Jan, this condition is also giving me 1st of Jan. Is it 1st of Jan? Yeah. So the second row has 2nd of Jan, so this is returning me the 2nd of Jan. So the very same measure, if I go back even though I'm defining it as the max sales invoice date, when I pull it individually on the canvas, it's giving me 31st of December. But the moment I pull it in the context of each row, context of this date, this particular measure is actually honoring that filter context and then giving me the max sales invoice date in that particular context. So if I instead of sales date, if I return the sales amount, you'll see that I will get the identical result as I am seeing in the previous filter measure, which is even if I use it in the row or if I use it in a variable, I'm getting exactly identical output, because in the context of this row, the sales date or the max sales date, sales invoice date rather, is going to be 1st of Jan, even though the max sales date in without any filter context is 31st of December 2021. Now, how do I get around it? Let's try to tweak this a little bit. What if I want to get around this particular condition? Now, there are two ways. I'll just do one hard-coded way, and then there's another way. So let's create another measure. I will call it filter condition var, and I will on purpose call it hard-coded. Hard-coded. Okay. And instead of defining this, I will define the date as, let's say, 7th of Jan. 7th of Jan sounds good. 2020, and the month will be Jan and the day will be 7th of Jan. So I want only the sales amount which is from 7th of Jan. So if I hit enter and if I pull this measure on this particular table, so I'll only see the sales amount corresponding to 7th Jan and above. And before that, I'm only going to see blank, because in this case, even though we have defined it in our variable, because we have defined it in a variable. In the earlier case, where we had defined this as max, this max was indeed using that filter context and then using that value to define what the sales date is going to be. Whereas in the other case, even though the entire code is same, identical, the difference here is that since we have hard coded this value as a static value, now it doesn't matter what the filter context is, it's going to honor this particular date as 7th of Jan and then give me the output. Now, what if I want to negate certain filter context, but I don't want to hard code it? So in order to do that, let's create another variation of this measure. So let's copy this and I'll create a new measure. Filter condition where I will call it ignore filter context. Such verbose names. Now I will calculate the sales invoice date, sales amount, or max. Yeah, I want the max sales date because that's what we wanted, sales invoice date, and I will use that all function. You know, the all function that we have used in one of my previous videos where we wanted to negate the inherent filter context of that table. So I'll use the sales table, and this way, if I then return, let me just return the sales date first, and then let me pull this on the canvas. Then it is giving me the date as 31st December as it should, because that's the max date. Now, what if I pull this particular measure on the canvas? What result am I going to get? Let's just see what happens. I believe we should get the sales date corresponding to 31st December throughout my entire table. So if I pull it here, okay, since I have to return not the sales date, but I have to return the sales amount. So if I hit enter, okay, so what's happening is I think what I said was partially correct or completely incorrect. If I sort this date in the descending order, so I can see that I am only seeing the sales amount corresponding to 31st December 2021 because this particular measure, which is filter condition, ignore this filter context, is this particular condition is going to ignore the filter context by the date column in my table, which is why it is going to source the max value, which in this case is 31st December. And there's only going to be one condition where this turns out to be true, which is when the date is 31st of December. And only on that day, I'm going to see the sales amount. So that's what we wanted. Now, if I could see all the dates when I return the sale date, whereas I see the blank values when I pull the sales amount. I believe that's because in this situation, in this particular condition, I've used the all statement. So the all statement is going to override the filter context, whereas this particular uh, variable or this particular logic, this calculate, is not overriding that uh, filter context, which is why we are only seeing the value when this condition turns out to be true, and we see the sales amount corresponding to 31st December only. So again, I'll quickly change this to sales amount, and then I'll only see the sales date corresponding to 31st of December 2021. So this was what I wanted to discuss in this video. In this first case, we have simply used the row context in the filter function. I mean, we are iterating row by row and checking what the max sales invoice date is in that particular row. The second situation, we are defining the max sales invoice date, but the moment you're pulling it in the context of that date table, it is going to give us that date itself as the max sales date. And if I hard code the value, in that case, it is only going to consider this date at the starting point and then give us values after the start date. And in this case, it is just going to completely ignore uh, the filter context of the dates that you have introduced in the table and give us the value only for that last row where this condition turns out to be true. And now, one interesting thing to notice here is that in my previous video, I have used something like this, wherein in this particular condition, where this week sales, I had used a filter function wherein I had defined that the date year is equal to max of date year and the date week number is equal to max of date week number. This was because I wanted the inherent filter context to be used and return me the values considering the filter context of that particular row. Whereas just below that, I have used another filter function in which I've defined a variable which is going to get the max value from this particular table, and that max value is then going to be compared to the sales amount. So if you haven't already watched that video, I would recommend you to watch this video and then watch this again, because then you'll see the difference of how the filter function is behaving different in these two conditions in the same measure. So yeah, this was the purpose of this video, to just try and understand how the filter condition would work in different situations. Now you can try and change the filter, the context in which that those measures are called upon, and see for yourself how the results are changing. And let me know in the comments. I'll be also eager to learn about this, and I'll also try about using the same the measures that I've created in different contexts and see how the results is going to vary. But yeah, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed watching this video and saw the subtle variations of filter function works. If you did, please share it with your friends, and like I say at the end of every video, thanks for watching and happy learning.